Okay, now there's a second famous concept associated with capitalism or the market process that emerged first back in the 1940s, but is so famous that it keeps being repeated over and over and over and over again, even up until the present day. And this is known as the broken window fallacy. The broken window fallacy. Now, it's a fallacy. What's a fallacy? A fallacy is something that ultimately is a conclusion that is false, even though it may seem to be true on the surface or may contain partial truths. But a fallacy is something that comes from the same root as the word false. It's fallacious. It's not true. But people believe it, and it keeps being repeated decade after decade, as I said, up until today. So it's a very famous concept in economics. Let me describe it to you. And I'll do so by means of a little story. Let's say one afternoon, we're in a big city, I don't know, New York, Chicago, Washington, whatever, Minneapolis, and in the downtown area, and there's all kinds of people on the streets, on the sidewalks, walking past stores with big plate glass windows and so forth, and people are, it's a busy summer afternoon. And let's say it's an afternoon and school lets out, and the school's let out, and a bunch of kids, a bunch of rowdy kids, teenagers, sort of getting a little wild. And as they're hanging out, one of the kids takes a rock and throws it through the window of the tailor shop and breaks the window. Kids run off. The window is broken. Gradually, the passersby start to notice this, and say a little crowd develops outside of the broken window, and people are, complaining and saying, "This is terrible. What's going on? This destruction is bad. It's wrong. I mean, what's wrong with these kids?" and so forth. And as this is going on, finally, somebody in the back of the crowd steps up and says, "Everybody, you're complaining and all that, but maybe that your complaining is being misguided." He says, "Because if you think about it, what has happened here? These kids broke the window, yes, okay, that's bad, that's not good. But actually, what they did may be a positive benefit to society as a whole. How so? Because, okay, they broke the window, bad. But what's happening? Now, the glassmaker down the street, the tailor's going to want to replace the window. He's going to have to go to the glassmaker and place an order for a new window. The glassmaker is going to have an additional order and make additional profit, more than he would have made if the window hadn't been broken. This is a boon to the glassmaker. It has increased his income, and he is now better off. So actually, these kids were doing society a favor. They have engaged in what you might call economic stimulus, right? That's what they call, right? Spending, additional spending in the economy. And that's what's happened here. This glassmaker now has an order that he didn't have, that he wouldn't have had without the window being broken. So perhaps things of destruction can lead to economic benefits for society. So stop complaining. Okay, well, is he right? Is it good? Can destruction be beneficial to society? Should we, people are worried about employment and all kinds of issues. Maybe we should all just stop what we're doing and go outside and start throwing rocks through windows. Maybe we could smash all the windows in the cars and in PBA's windows. I mean, that is going to create, it's going to stimulate the economy. That is going to create a lot of new orders for all those manufacturers who replace glass windows. Would that be a good thing to do? Common sense tells us no. Well, what's wrong with that picture? There's a partial truth in it, which is why we call it a fallacy. It's true that destruction of things does benefit certain businesses and certain industries. Those involved in the construction industries, people who make plate glass windows to replace broken windows, they will benefit from that destruction, and they might be applauding such efforts. But is that a net benefit to society as a whole? As I said, should we all be out there destroying things? Clearly not. Because why? Why is the broken window fallacy a fallacy? Well, it's a fallacy for two reasons. Two reasons that really generally underlie all bad or false economic reasoning and economic policy. And that is these two problems. The problem is, as human beings, we have a propensity toward two things. On the one hand, we tend to see just what is right in front of our eyes. And not everybody has the imagination to trace out other consequences that are not immediately visible in the present moment. And the second thing is we tend to be short-sighted. We tend to look at the short-term effects of an act or a policy and not trace out mentally the longer-term consequences. Bad economic policy always is involved. One of those two things is always involved in bad economic reasoning or bad economic policy. Either the person neglects to take into account both the immediate and the longer-term consequences, or they take into account the effect on one person or one group and not on all groups in society. And both of those errors are embedded in this broken window fallacy. Let's go back and look at why it's a fallacy. Let's do a little semi-economic analysis. All right, what was the economic situation before the window was broken? We had the tailor, he had his window and his shop, and let's say he had $5,000 in a savings account that he was going to use to buy a new computer equipment for his shop. Well, kids break the window. What's his situation now? Well, he still has the shop. He has the $5,000 in the bank, but now his window is broken. So he has to use the $5,000 of his savings to replace that window. What's his situation? He is now worse off than he was before because now he has the shop and he has a new window, but he has lost the $5,000 from his savings that he had to use to replace the window with. He has an absolute loss of $5,000. Now, it's true the glassmaker's income has increased by the $5,000 that he had to pay for the window. But the glassmaker's profit is bought at the expense of the tailor's loss. There is no net benefit to society. At best, there's a redistribution of wealth away from the tailor and to the glassmaker. But the tailor's not the only one who's taken a loss here. Who else has taken a loss? This is where we have to trace out the effect not just on one person, but on others. The tailor has absolutely lost $5,000, but remember, he had that $5,000 in the bank and he was planning to buy a new computer system with that $5,000. Well, he had to use the $5,000 to replace the window, so he no longer has that money available to buy a new computer. So the computer sales company, the computer salesman, also has experienced a loss of the $5,000, which would have been spent on a new computer if the window hadn't been broken. So the tailor has a net loss and the computer salesman has a net loss. Again, it's not offset by the gain of the glassmaker. So we have to take into account not just what's in front of our eyes, the glassmaker has made a new sale, but we have to think about the others involved, the tailor and then also the invisible man, the computer salesman, right? But he may be invisible, but he is every bit as much affected by this destruction as the tailor, and so forth. This fallacy, as I said, repeats itself over and over and over again. It first started after World War II, when the German economy and infrastructure had been destroyed by the Allies during the war. We had something called the Marshall Plan and other kinds of economic assistance where the Allied countries went in and rebuilt the German infrastructure. And this was hailed as, oh, this is actually a good thing for the American taxpayer, because now, or the American business, because now all these businesses are going to have to be hired, get government contracts to go into Germany and rebuild everything that was destroyed. That's going to create lots of extra jobs and income for the defense contractors in the United States. So actually, we should really be applauding this destruction in Germany because it generated so much additional employment and income for the American firms involved in the reconstruction of Europe. Let me give you a couple other examples before I point out the flaws in all of these arguments. Another common one was after 9/11, when the Twin Towers were destroyed. If you look in the newspapers of the time, the New York newspapers, the opinion pieces, it says, okay, people, I know this is terrible, it's sad, it's horrible, but look, there's a silver lining here. Yes, they've destroyed those towers, and this is back when they were still planning to rebuild them. They said, but look, We're going to rebuild these towers, and what's going to happen? New York City is going to experience a tremendous economic boom. We're going to have to hire all kinds of contractors and electricians and you name it to rebuild those towers. We are going to have tremendous economic stimulus, and there will be an economic boom here in New York City. So cheer up, it's not all that bad. Final example that's of great relevance to us here in South Florida. And go look in the Palm Beach Post if you'd like to see examples of this in recent years. I don't know if most of you were too young to remember, but back in 2004, 2005, we had a series of pretty devastating hurricanes down here in South Florida, Francis and then Jean. And at the time, everybody was in shock. It was a lot of damage done. But the Palm Beach Post published an op-ed saying, cheer up, everybody, it's not that bad. Yes, there's been tremendous destruction here, et cetera, but look at the economic boom we're going to be experiencing here in Palm Beach County as all of these structures need to be rebuilt. The construction industries are going to make huge profits, roofing industries, people who, debris removal, window replacement, and all the other kinds of construction industries. We're going to have tremendous economic boom here in West Palm due to the hurricane damage and so forth that has to be repaired. In all cases, they're making the exact same error. Germany, 9/11, and West Palm Beach. And what's the error they're making? It's the broken window fallacy. They're looking at what's right before their eyes, the burst in economic activity for the construction industries, and they are, in fact, benefiting. That's the element of truth in the broken window fallacy. The defense contractors after World War II, the debris removal firms and roofers and all the others involved in the construction trades here in West Palm, those industries do in fact benefit from destruction. They absolutely do, but their gain is purchased at somebody else's loss. Who loses in all these situations? Who lost after World War II when America went in and rebuilt the German infrastructure? Construction companies gained, true. But who lost? Who had to pay for that? Well, it was paid for by the American taxpayer. So American taxpayers were taxed a certain amount, let me just make up a number and say $5,000 a piece, which went to pay for the reconstruction of war-torn Germany. The construction companies benefited, yes, but that was at the expense of the American taxpayer, who now had $5,000 less to spend on the things that they personally need or want. Instead, it was taxed from them, spent on the reconstruction in Europe, and they had $5,000 less to spend on things they needed, such as new washing machine and dryer, new carpeting, education for their children, all the everyday things that all kinds of people need. But they had $5,000 less to do that. And not only the taxpayer had a loss, who else has a loss? Who's the invisible man here? Let's say your roof was destroyed during a hurricane and you had to use $10,000 in saving to replace your roof. Okay, you as the homeowner are out $10,000. But who else loses? All those businesses that you would have purchased from using the $10,000 that you had to use to replace the roof. If you didn't have to replace the roof because of the damage, you would have had $10,000 to spend on many other things: automobiles, washing machines, dryers, house furnishings, clothing, trips to Europe, you name it. And all those businesses that would have received orders from you with your $10,000 now don't get any because that you had to spend that money on repairing your roof. So not just is the direct person who has damage to their home at a loss, but all those other businesses that would have received orders if the hurricane damage had not occurred also suffer losses. Now, you don't see those people. They're the unseen men, the invisible people, but their business contracts nevertheless, whether you see them or not. They are getting fewer sales than they would have gotten if the destruction hadn't occurred. And this, again, we'll come back, we'll summarize the errors involved in the broken window fallacy, which are errors that lie at the heart of all false economic reasoning and policy and conclusions. And that's the problem, is that good economic theory, the art of economics, consists in looking not just at the immediate, but also the long-term consequences of any act or policy, and also in looking at the effect not merely on one person or group, but on all members of society. And if you'll notice, whenever you do see false economic conclusions, it's always one of those two errors that lie at the heart of it. So when you're analyzing anything from an economic perspective, please try to remember to look not just at what's right before your eyes, the immediate effect, but also the longer-term consequences. And not just the effect on the one person who's being affected, but also the effect on other groups, all other groups in society. That's what good economic reasoning involves, and what bad economic reasoning does not involve. Okay, I think we've covered this part of our discussion of capitalism.